Well, it's good to see everybody out this evening. It's been a pretty day. It was awful cool this morning, but this afternoon it warmed up and it's been a really nice day. But I'm glad to see you back again tonight. Hopefully the things we talk about will benefit us all. I think it's something that we're going to talk about is applicable, maybe needed in today's day. I want to spend some time talking about social media. And I intend to try to talk about maybe some of the good things about it and then maybe some of the dangers of it. And so I've titled the lesson, Social Media, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And that's what we'll try to talk about a little bit this evening. I read an article about social media, the dangers of social media. And this article, not from a religious perspective at all, the article was just a worldly perspective. It talked about mental health, how people on social media that spend a lot of time on social media actually experience loneliness, depression, due to being on social media. It's kind of odd. You think it would connect people, but actually that's what people deal with. One of the other things that is obviously an issue with social media is that things on there, people post good things. You know, I don't want to post myself in a negative light. So if I'm having a terrible day and everything's a disaster, I'm not going to post about that maybe, unless it's somebody else's fault, or I think it is. I'm only going to post the good things. And so it makes this kind of idealistic existence. And I look at that, everybody else, man, everything's going great for them, and maybe it's not for me. And so I think negatively of myself. Maybe people use social media as their news method. And so, you know, there's a lot of misinformation on there. You know, the saying is, if it's on the internet, it's got to be true, right? Obviously, that's not true. And social media is no exception to that. So I want to talk about social media, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I looked up real quick, did a real quick search. Just think in your mind, how many people use Facebook on a daily basis? It's 2.1 billion on a daily basis use Facebook. Monthly basis, 3 billion people on the planet use Facebook. That's a lot. So I think this is applicable, and we're going to try to mention several things about social media. So hopefully things we talk about will be beneficial to us. In the first place, I said we kind of try to start with the good. Potential benefits from social media. I want to try to be fair. I wouldn't want anybody to think that this is like my pet peeve. I'm all mad at social media, and so Josh is just ranting about something he doesn't like. I don't want to leave that impression. I think there are some benefits to social media, and I don't want to overlook those. You know, in Matthew 5 and verse 16, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said, "Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven." I think there's potential to let your light shine in several ways. I don't think Jesus at all had, well, in the mind of God, he probably knew what was going to come, right? But he wasn't talking about social media here. He was just talking about as you live from day to day, as you're conducting yourself, you let your light shine before men. Social media, maybe there's an opportunity to do that, to shine your light. Maybe we can spread the word of God in some ways or another. You know, we post articles on Facebook that are written here that Greg writes. And so maybe that's a good way to put the word of God out there to some degree, to talk to people about the truth. In 1 Thessalonians 1 and verse 8, it says, "For from you the word of the Lord has sounded forth, not only in Macedonia and Achaia, but also in every place. Your faith toward God has gone out, so that we do not need to say anything." Paul commended those at Thessalonica for sounding the word of the Lord out. You know, we use, I guess YouTube counts as a social media app. We live stream on YouTube. You know, and so the messages that we are delivering, the classes that we have are being put on there for people to, you know, hopefully somebody will see that. Hopefully somebody's looking for the truth will watch those and hear about the gospel. That'd be great, wouldn't it? I think that's a benefit of using social media. So individually, I think we're posting things, the congregation does on social media. Romans 12 and verse 15 says, "Rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep." You know, social media is a way to connect people. And so there's people that maybe we're not even really in the same location as, but we know Christians in another state. And they post something on there, and maybe we can have an opportunity to connect with them. Maybe we have a chance to rejoice with them. Maybe somebody has a family member that obeys the gospel, and they post about that. And that's a good opportunity for us to congratulate them. And hey, let's say that's a great thing, and we're rejoicing with you. Maybe there's some sad situation and somebody posts about it. It's a chance for us to connect with people. I'm just saying I think those are potential benefits of social media. people being connected over long distances. There's probably more benefits that we could talk about, but I just wanted to give a fair shake to the benefits side of it. So I'll call that good. But with the good, there may be a whole lot of bad. And so I think we want to spend the rest of the time talking about that. So I'm not saying all social media, everything, if you're on it, is bad. It's got potential to be, but there are some benefits to it. But let's start talking about maybe some of the bad. You know, in the first place, a lot of oversharing and grumbling takes place on social media. You know, there's an app that pops up and says, "What's on your mind? What are you thinking about?" That invites us to express our feelings, perhaps maybe beyond what's reasonable or even necessary. And people do that. People on social media overshare. People grumble and complain a lot on social media, unfortunately. That's one of the things that happens there. In Proverbs 29 and verse 11, proverb writer says, "A fool vents all his feelings, but a wise man holds them back." You know, it's great to have things at your fingertips. We can access a lot of things on the internet. We can access things on social media at our fingertips. But if we are foolish and we go to social media because I'm angry, then I will vent that out. I will let all my feelings out. And then it's out there for everybody to see. The proverb writer says it's a wise person that holds back their feelings. So be careful on social media. Be careful what you say when you're upset. Earlier today, Harper got in trouble and she got a spanking. And so when she was upset, she told Marley that she doesn't want to play with me anymore. She just wants to play with Marley. She was mad at me, right? And so I talked to her. She said, "I didn't really mean it." I go, "Well, you said that when you're angry. I got to be careful about that too. When you're angry and you say things that you ought not sometimes. You say things you don't mean." And so that's what a foolish person does. We got to be careful about that. And so if I've got social media pulled up, I'm just so mad, I don't know what good it's going to do anyway, except maybe people will comment and say, "Oh, that is terrible." But if I go and start venting, I'm acting foolishly. And I think that's a negative thing about social media. In Proverbs 10 and verse 19, it says, "When there are many words, transgression is unavoidable, but he who restrains his lips is wise." Not sure, there's some debate about it, whether it's Mark Twain or whether it's Abraham Lincoln that said it, but there's a saying that goes, I'm not going to say it exactly right, but the saying is, you know, people may think that you're foolish, but you can open your mouth and then prove them right. The proverb writer long before that, though, said, if you do a lot of talking, transgression is unavoidable. You're going to say something that's wrong, but if you restrain your lips, that's a wise thing to do. You know, people have an avenue to go and vent foolishness, and they do. That's what social media is used for a lot. Not everybody, but the majority of people, I would argue, do. And they say things that they ought not. It's a wise thing to restrain what you are thinking. Calm down, let cooler heads prevail. We need to have a degree of self-control, I think, visible to hundreds or thousands of people, maybe for years to come, and I'm just venting about something. That's unwise, and I think that's what the proverb writer says. So I've got to be careful if I'm using social media to not do that. In Philippians 2, in verse 14, Paul said, "Do all things without grumbling or disputing." A lot of the things we're talking about, social media is not in mind, but the statement is true. We ought not to be grumbling or disputing or complaining about things. Think about God's people of old, how they complain. They got to the wilderness, we're complaining, we were better off back in Egypt, and it's just silly. But they spent time complaining, and God was not happy about that. He had just delivered them from Egypt, and then now you're complaining, you want to go back? The same thing was true in New Testament times. The same thing is true today. If we use it as an outlet to grumble and complain, then that's bad, and we shouldn't do that. People maybe feel like their feelings or concerns are unheard by family, unheard by friends, maybe unheard by the retailers they do business with, and then we air out our grievances online, and we just look like we're complainers. And so we ought to be content. We ought to be thankful people, and grumbling is contrary to both of those things. So oversharing and grumbling. We don't do show of hands, but have you ever seen somebody on social media overshare or grumble? I mean, if you've been on there, you've seen it. And that's a bad aspect of social media, unfortunately. What about wasting time? I think this could be a potential bad of social media. Wasting time. we only have so much time. Life is short. And when we get to the end of our life, nobody's going to say, man, I wish I'd have just spent more time scrolling on Facebook. That's not going to be in our thought process when life is over. We waste a lot of time, or there's potential to waste a lot of time being on social media. And so, like a lot of things, we need to be cognizant of how much time we're spending doing these things, especially if we're just mindlessly scrolling on social media. I'm sure we got something better to be doing. So we've got to be aware of time. In Ephesians 5 and verse 16, Paul said, making the most of your time because the days are evil. The days are evil because they're going to get away from you. We've only got a limited amount of time. Lives aren't going to last forever. I know people live like they do. I think people act like they do. I got plenty of time. I don't have to worry about wasting time because I've still got a lot of time left. We're not guaranteed that. And if we're not making the most of our time, I would argue, if we waste hours on social media. Sometimes people spend hours on end. I looked up some statistics. I don't want to bore you with statistics, but there's some people that spend the majority of their day just scrolling on social media. And I can see, it makes sense to me why people would be depressed if that's what we're doing in most of our time. James 4 and verse 14 says, yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you're a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. We just got a short time on this earth. And time goes by quick. And again, when we get to the end of life, we're not gonna think, man, if I'd have just spent more time on social media. And there's a lot of things that we could say that about. If I'd have just spent more time, doing these things that don't really amount to much at the end of life. So think about that, wasting time. Even if we're not doing anything bad, we're not oversharing, we're not grumbling. Even if we're doing things that seem to be beneficial, if we spend 16 hours a day on social media, we're wasting a lot of time. What about showing off of self or things? Showing off ourselves or things. There's this, I guess probably 20 years ago, maybe 25, I don't know. But the term selfie wouldn't have meant anything to a lot of people. But that's what people do on social media. Now you take a selfie, right? We take pictures of ourselves. Now I guess selfies aren't wrong per se. If you take a picture of yourself, that's not wrong in and of itself. But people spend a lot of time every moment of every day. I got to take a picture of myself and post it on social media. That could be a problem, especially if our goal is I want to take a picture of myself and I want people to comment about how good I look today or how nice my outfit is or whatever. I'm out there fishing for compliments. I'll throw it out there and hopefully people will tell me how great and wonderful I am. Showing off of self, showing off of things, that's not a good thing. In 1 Timothy 2, verses 9 and 10, pretty familiar couple of verses here. It says, likewise also that women should adorn themselves in respectable apparel, with modesty and self-control, not with braided hair or gold or pearls or costly attire, but with what is proper for women who profess godliness with good works. And so, it's nice to see faces of friends and family if you look online. That's a nice thing. I'm not saying if you post a picture of yourself that you've done anything wrong. I'm just saying that there's an overemphasis on the external sometimes. And that should be avoided. Especially, we need to be clothed properly at all times. But this idea of modesty and self-control, that will show in what we wear, but that'll show in how we act as well. If my goal is just to show off everything I've got, then that's a problem. I think that's violating the principle that's set forth here. In 1 Peter 3, beginning at verse 3, it says, your adornment must not be merely external, braiding the hair, wearing gold jewelry, or putting on dresses, but let it be the hidden person of the heart with the imperishable quality of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is precious in the sight of God. And so, again, not just merely external. We're going to be, parts of our lives are going to be external, but it shouldn't be just that. It should be some of this imperishable quality of a gentle and quiet spirit. And notice, that's what's precious in the sight of God. It's not what just I have on the outside. It's inward beauty. That's what God values, and we need to learn to appreciate it the way He does. And so if we're all caught up on what we look like and what we're wearing and all that, and I want everybody to see that and show off, then we're off base. And that's the point that I'm trying to make. So showing off of self, but there is a problem with showing off of things too. You know, people on social media spend time showing off the stuff that they have. Now, you buy something new and you're excited about that. Let's say you move, you buy a new house, and you take a picture of that. I'm not saying that that's wrong, but you know there's people that post every time they get something new, and it's to show off, right? So I get a new truck, and I take a picture of that truck, and I want people to tell me how sweet that truck is. Man, that's a sweet truck. Man, that thing is nice. And I want people to tell me that. I kind of need that validation. Tell me my truck is real nice. And if somebody doesn't, I'm like, hey, did you not see my truck that I posted on Facebook? Tell me how cool that is. That's what a lot of people get into on social media, showing off of things. I'll just give you one verse along those lines. Jesus said, take heed and beware of covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of the things he possesses. That's not what life is all about. And so for me to want to show off everything, to try to get some people to, oh man, that new thing you got is so awesome. I need that. I need you to tell me that. Life isn't about the abundance of the things that you have. That's not what life should be about, Jesus said. But also, we got to be aware of covetousness. So from the other perspective, if somebody's always doing that, and you're like, oh man, they got a new truck. Man, I wish I had a truck like that. Or look at this new shirt they got, or look at this new pair of shoes. It could be anything. It could be anything, great or small. And we're constantly looking at that like, oh man, if I could just get what they've had. And we get this covetous type attitude. That Jesus said, take heed and beware of that. That's not what life is all about, right? So there's a couple aspects there. Showing off of self, showing off of things. That's a bad, I would argue, of social media. What about liking and sharing immoral content? Liking and sharing immoral content. This is something I think we got to be careful about if you're using social media. You know, every once in a while, Kristen and I will send each other videos on Instagram. I've got an Instagram. I've never posted anything, but I'll send videos, and maybe I'll send Mitchell some videos every once in a while. But you got to be careful, because a lot of the content on there is just filthy, right? I mean, if you listen to it and then people are using bad language, you're like, oh man. You know, I don't want to send that and share that, because then that looks like my stamp of approval on that. That's the kind of content that you like. I think that'd be a bad example. I think I'd be a bad example to Mitchell. I think I'd be a bad example to Kristen if I send something that's got immoral content in it. And you really got to be careful if you're gonna use it. You got to be careful and make sure you use it in a way that wouldn't be wrong in God's sight. So I think we got to be careful about liking and sharing immoral content. In Colossians 3 and verse 8, it says, but now you yourselves are to put off all these: anger, wrath, malice, blasphemy, filthy language out of your mouth. So here Paul's talking about several different things. One of those that we underlined here is filthy language. You know, we don't want to talk that way. If I'm just talking filthily, then God's not going to be happy with that. I'm certainly not going to be a good influence on somebody if they hear me. You know, we'd say cussing like a sailor. That's not going to be a good influence on somebody. Certainly not something that a Christian should be doing. But what if I share a video? What if I send a video, or if I like a post or whatever, and the person's just talking filthy? Well, I'm kind of putting my stamp of approval on that. I'm kind of saying that I agree with that, or I think, you know, it's okay. I think we really got to be careful about that. I don't want to even like that, because what if somebody who's a new Christian goes and sees that video and like, well, Josh liked this video. He must approve of the message, approve of the content. That'd be pretty bad, right? I would say that'd be a pretty bad influence. And so I think we got to be careful. In Ephesians 5, verse 3, it says, but fornication and all uncleanness or covetousness, let it not be even named among you, as is fitting for saints, neither filthiness, nor foolish talking, nor coarse jesting, which are not fitting, but rather giving of thanks. Several things mentioned here. But, you know, sometimes we used to maybe talk about, before social media was a thing, maybe you heard preachers talk about this, people telling jokes. Maybe you're at the office in the break room and somebody's telling a dirty joke. And so the challenge for you is to not get, I mean, it's tough sometimes. You know, you don't want to laugh at that and make people think you approve of dirty jokes. I've told you before, I'm just shocked sometimes at high-level people in companies that I've worked for. I mean, intelligent people, very smart, very educated, very successful in their career, and they just talk filthy. I mean, just filthy as they can talk. And dirty jokes aren't really off the table, and anything goes. It's tough sometimes to stand back and say, well, I'm not gonna get involved in that. I'm not gonna laugh at that because it's not funny. It's nasty because God wouldn't be pleased with it. All of these things that are mentioned, it's not fitting for saints. Let it not even be named among you as it is fitting for saints. But if we're on social media and we're subscribing to something, or we're liking something, or we're sharing something, I think again, we are not abiding by these godly principles. We shouldn't be taking part in those things that are not fitting. And so that's something to be aware of. I also thought about, every once in a while you'll see these videos and it'll be some denominational preacher, and maybe for a 10 or 15 second clip, maybe the things that they say are good actually in that clip. But I don't want to like or share those. I don't want to be guilty of bidding them Godspeed and passing their message along. But also, what if somebody sees, well, Josh liked that, or he shared that? Or what if you saw something that I know Greg's not on social media, but what if you saw Greg, he liked a post by some denominational preacher, and you go to that guy's page and he's teaching all kinds of false doctrine. You'd say, maybe Greg agrees with this stuff. Maybe he likes this guy. That'd be a discouragement. And so be careful about what you like, about what you share, especially if it's got immoral content in it. We don't need to be caught up in that. What about virtue signaling? Here's another terminology. I mean, man, I guess 20 years ago, nobody even knew what you're talking about, virtue signaling. You know what virtue signaling is, right? Virtue signaling is when you do good, but you want everybody to know that you did good. So you have to go on social media to tell people about, look what I did today. I did great. There was somebody that really needed help, and I helped them. And the purpose in which people do that is they want to pat themselves on the back, and then they want other people to say, oh, you're so great. You've done so good. Wow, what a great person you are. And that's what they're looking for. Again, they're fishing for compliments, and they'll catch some, right? There's people that'll get on there and they'll give you some compliments if that's what you're looking for. The problem with that is, though, in the verses that were read for us, Jesus said, take heed that you do not do your charitable deeds before men to be seen by them. Otherwise, you have no reward from your Father in heaven. Therefore, when you do a charitable deed, do not sound a trumpet before you as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory from men. Assuredly, I say to you, they have their reward. But when you do a charitable deed, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, that your charitable deed may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will himself reward you openly. In that same context, Jesus talks about praying. Don't pray standing out in the streets to be seen of men. And there's several things he's talking about. In this case, he's talking about charitable deeds. Don't do those to be seen of men. If I want to do something good for somebody, do that. If it's good, do it. But if you're looking for praise of men, then you can get that very easily. I've seen videos of people taking videos of somebody else acting like they're doing a good deed. So a car will pull up, and it'll be in a area of town where maybe there's homeless people living there, and so they'll hop out of the car and act like they're doing something good. Hold on, did you get that? Did you get that on video? In order to try to get somebody to say you did good, and then they'll post it, and people say, "Oh, what a great person you are." Well, they're doing that to be seen of men. And I think Jesus' promise is true. I say to you, they have their reward. They have been seen by others doing that, and people think they're just great and wonderful. But that's not what we're supposed to do. We got the wrong motive. We got the wrong motive there. We're not doing that to get likes. We're doing it because it's the right thing to do, and that's what we should be doing. So don't be virtue signaling on social media. A lot of people do that. Proverbs 27 and verse 2 says, "Let another man praise you and not your own mouth, a stranger and not your own lips." This is talking about, this isn't talking about, let me fish for some praise. I'll post something online and I want others to praise me. What this is talking about is sincere compliments for our good behavior. If you do things that are good and right, not to be seen of men, but somebody sees you doing it and then they offer you praise for that, that's what is a good thing here. That's what the proverb writer is talking about. Don't seek your own praise. If you do that, God's not happy with that. You're doing that for the wrong reasons. And so, but again, a sincere compliment for doing good is a good thing. we don't need to be puffing ourselves up, not our own mouth. So virtue signaling, I think, is a problem on social media. All right, so we talked about several things. There's probably a bunch more that we could add to the list. I'll give you just one more. Virtual worship. Virtual worship. Again, probably, 25 years ago, people wouldn't know what that is. What is virtual worship? But it's kind of a thing now with the rise of social media, maybe on Facebook or YouTube or whatever kind of social media platform. The rise of virtual worship. I think COVID obviously really ramped this whole business up where people can, it's a lot easier on Sunday morning to get up in my PJs, and I don't drink coffee, but if you get a cup of coffee and kick back in the recliner and we'll watch some church service and that'll be great. People at work will come in sometimes like, oh yeah, I caught the service on Sunday. It's just real odd to me. But at any rate, people are doing that. People are virtual worshiping, because it's much easier than having to get up, get ready, drag the kids out, get them ready, and then, they're not, hold on, they got something on their clothes. We're going to have to change before we go. It's a disaster. And so virtual worship seems like a good option. The issue with that is it kind of goes against the whole plan for the church and God's wisdom. In 1 Corinthians 11, you remember that Paul was given instructions to the church at Corinth. The issue here was they were taking the Lord's Supper, but they were doing it wrong. That's the context of what's being talking about. They were just doing things all wrong. They were having a common meal, and Paul is really correcting them on that. But in 1 Corinthians 11, from verse 17 down to about verse 34, 5 times the phrase "come together" is used, and the 3 of them are on the screen right here. 1 Corinthians 11, verse 17 says, "Now in giving these instructions, I do not praise you, since you come together, not for the better, but for the worse. First of all, when you come together as a church, I hear that there be divisions among you, and in part I believe it. Therefore, when you come together in one place, it is not to eat the Lord's Supper, for in eating each one takes his own supper ahead of others. One is hungry, another is drunk." So listen, the context is they were doing things wrong. For our lesson, I just want to point out that they were supposed to be coming together. They were supposed to be coming together and taking the Lord's Supper in the proper way. I'm just saying here that the phrase is used, you come together. The church comes together. Here, actually, it says you come together as a church. There it's, the phrase ecclesia, the called out. That's what the church is. The people are coming together. You can't take the Lord's Supper all scattered out or at the house virtually. That's what Paul is talking about. The expectation on Paul's part was that the members of the church at Corinth came together to eat the Lord's Supper as a church. But you got to come together. And so true worship involves coming together, not staying at home and watching on a screen. In Colossians 3 and verse 16, this isn't the only one, but this is one of those one to another propositions. It says, "Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly in all wisdom, teaching and admonishing one another in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, singing with grace in your hearts to the Lord." I cannot teach and admonish anybody if I'm sitting at home alone and watching service on a screen. I can't, it's a reciprocal thing. I can't admonish you and you can't admonish me if I'm there. There's just the wisdom of God was for the church to come together and to be together in one place. And that's what he talked about in 1 Corinthians. Here's one of the things as singing. I don't think we think about that a lot. But when we sing, we're teaching one another. Bob led us in some songs. We talked about the kingdom of God. We're teaching one another. We're encouraging one another. We sang "No Tears in Heaven." That's what we're working toward. We're here together singing praises to God, but we're also teaching one another. Let's work to make it to that place where there's no tears. And we can't do that virtually. I think that's a big challenge today. There's some Christians who are struggling with the idea of virtual worship. So, social media, the good, the bad, and maybe some of it's just ugly. There are some benefits, though. I don't want you to leave thinking that I'm just ranting about social media because I don't like it. There are some benefits to it, and I don't want to overlook those. But I think you have to agree. And I didn't even I think we could probably add multiple other things that could be an issue. So we gotta use it wisely. Again, there's billions of people using some social media platforms. It's amazing. But if we want to be good stewards of the tools that have been made available to us, we can use it for good, or we can use it in a lot of ways for bad. All right, I appreciate your attention tonight to the things that we had to say. Not typical, I don't think, but I think maybe hopefully timely, because we're living in a world where everything's at our fingertips. We can with a couple of clicks, we can get just about anything. That's a good thing, maybe, but that's also, it can be a very bad thing. If you're here tonight, we didn't spend time talking about what you need to do to be saved. We mainly talked to those of us that are Christians and what we need to do to be pleasing to God in this area. But if you're here and you haven't become a Christian, why not? Why not? We sang about heaven again. Don't you want to go there? Don't you want to make it to heaven? I know that you do. If you really think about it and you're serious, you want to make it to heaven. The alternative isn't any place that any of us want to be. We don't want to be separated from God eternally. We want to make it to the place that's prepared for those that have lived according to the way that God has prescribed in His Word. He sent His Son to die for you in order to make that possible. Why don't you take advantage of it tonight? If you're here and you know what to do, you've heard the Word of God, you believe it, you're willing to repent of your sins and confess your faith in Christ, we'd be happy to baptize you into Christ tonight. And we'd all rejoice with you. Actually, the angels in heaven would rejoice as well. And so if that's your desire, then make that known. Or if you're here tonight and maybe in one of these areas, maybe this was something that you saw and you're like, oh, maybe I've shared some immoral content, or maybe I've done things wrong and I've used social media to do it, then make that right. You may not need to make that known publicly. Maybe you do. Personally, make it right. But if there's something that we can pray for you, we'd be glad to do that as well. If you have a spiritual need, come forward while we stand and while we sing.